Chris Godinez, licensed professional counselor, also the host of We Need to Talk on every Sunday at noon, and then I post these videos up during the week and on Sundays and all that sort of good stuff. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. The views and opinions stated herein are mine and mine alone. They do not represent the ACA, the APA, or any other therapist for that matter. Boom shakalaka done. I'd like to thank my sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/Chris Godinez. They're an online therapy company. They are international. They have over 40,000 therapists working for them, all master's level, PhD level. Just go online, fill out a questionnaire, and they will place you with the appropriate therapist in your state. I've gotten lots of good feedback from people using them. So thank you, BetterHelp.com/Chris Godinez. Okay, today's question is, how do I work with a resistant client? Whew. I swear I need to figure out how to disconnect that from my computer. So how to work with a resistant client. So generally, you want to get curious. You do. And you can't be afraid of them. You cannot be afraid of them being vengeful or angry or whatever they're going to be, because it's being run by fear. So when a client is resisting, when a client's not doing the work, when the client just wants to tell the same story over and over and over and over again, I can guarantee you they're terrified. They're terrified. So especially when you're dealing with personality disordered clients. So say, for example, really strong traits of borderline or all the way down on the end of the spectrum, borderline. So borderline is born of trauma, okay? And when a person slides down the spectrum from traits of to full-blown, possibly malignant, all of the personality disorders start overlapping, okay? And they will exhibit all 10 personality disorders, narcissism and avoidance and OCD and, you name it, they got it. And they can have that illogical thinking, the word salad. They can be very vengeful. They can be very angry. And really what all that is they're trying to protect that soft marshmallow inside. They're trying to protect themselves. They're terrified. They're terrified. And so a lot of therapists are like, oh my God, I need to get rid of them. Well, in some cases, you may need to refer out, especially if they're not getting better, especially if no matter what intervention you've done, they have not made any progress. Then ethically, yes, you need to refer them to a higher level of care. However, I think a lot of therapists just give up because they're difficult. Let's be clear. Working with somebody who is at the far end, full-blown traits of, absolutely has it, possibly overlinking other personality disorders, they are very difficult to work with, very. And it's because of their fear. And so they will do somersaults to avoid getting to the core issues. So what you want to do is when you recognize that you're dealing with somebody who is stuck, essentially, they're not getting better, they're not doing the work, they're not taking any of the suggestions, you're going to document like crazy, first of all. So you document, gave this intervention, client refused, gave this intervention, client refused, gave this intervention, client refused. So you show that you've been trying different ways of working with them. So once you realize that they may be full-blown borderline personality disorder with overlapping other personality disorders, you tell them the truth once you've, ruled out everything else. So it's like if somebody is borderline in the past, they would say, oh no, don't tell them that they're borderline. Don't let them know. And that's a disservice. That is, because they need to know what they've got. So hold on. Will they come unglued? Yeah. So that's their defense mechanism, is coming unglued, because it usually makes people go away or things go away. If they can rail enough and yell enough and scream enough and yell enough, they'll make people go away. Don't go away. Because that's the reality of the world. It's like the world's not going to go away, sweetheart. And neither am I. So here's the deal. Here's the symptoms. Here's what you're presenting with. Here's what you have. Here's how we're going to work on it. This is part of the treatment plan. It's like, okay, we got to deal with the trauma that created the borderline personality disorder in the first place. Borderline is rooted in trauma. A lot of times, borderline personality disordered people will insist to the moon that their childhood was normal. And that's when you got to be like, okay, well, then where did this come from? And you start getting curious. Tell me, where did this come from? When did you first start doing these behaviors? What is it that makes you so afraid to work on yourself? You're coming and you're spending time with me every week and you're paying me money and I'm giving you interventions, and yet you're not doing your part of it outside of this room. So what is going on? What's happening with you? What's the fear? What's stopping you? So you get curious and you start asking questions. And you let them know that they are borderline. If they are borderline, you let them know. And you give them the Borderline Survival Guide by Chapman and Gratz. You give it to them. Tell them to read it. This will tell you what's going on with you so that it's not this big, huge mystery. Now, sometimes what happens when you do that, one of two things is going to happen. Either they are going to wear the borderline mantle like, this is who they are, and you've got to pry their little fingers off of that and go, no, this is what you've got. Who you are is far greater than a diagnosis. Let's work on who you really are. This is what's happened to you. These behaviors are what you're doing, but that's not who you are. That's sometimes a hard concept for them to grasp. So when I confront clients that are not working on themselves, that are telling the same story over and over and over again, and that's oftentimes what they like to do. They like to tell the victim. They like to play the victim. So they tell the same story over and 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 over. You got to stop them. And you got to be like, okay, I have heard this story. We're not going down that tired road. We're not. What are you getting out of it? You're not getting better. You're not moving forward, and you're staying stuck. So how is that helping you? What's the payoff here? You got to ask a lot of questions. So the fear that therapists often have is, oh my God, they're so vengeful, and they are. When they get malignant, they absolutely get very vengeful. They're going to turn me into the board. They're going to do X, Y, and Z. Let them. If you've documented and you've shown, hey, I did this intervention, they refused. 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 I've talked to them about this. I asked the questions. This is their response, in quotations. Do you see where I'm going with that? You document. And if you need to refer them out, what you do is you give them fair warning. So what I will do with resistant clients is let them be aware. I will tell them, hey, this is what's happening. This is your diagnosis. This is the treatment plan. This is how we're going to deal with it. Okay? I'm not going to let you keep telling the same old stories over and over again. I do expect you to do the homework, because that was part of the agreement when I take people on, is I tell them point blank, I do CBT, I assign homework assignments, and I expect you to do them, period. That really does kind of clarify things for people. When you tell them that they have borderline, you make sure to differentiate. This is not who you are. This is what you have. Here's going to help you understand this book, The Borderline Survival Guide by Chapman and Gratz. This is going to help you understand why you're doing these behaviors that make you miserable and why you're not helping yourself. So here, read this book. And I suggest that every therapist read that book. It's called The Borderline Survival Guide by Chapman and Gratz. And it helps the person with borderline understand why they're doing these crazy behaviors that are hurting them and hurting the people around that they love. Now, borderlines are notorious for doing preemptive abandonments. So if they think you're going to abandon them, they're going to push you away and stop going to therapy. That's what they do. So what you do is you call it out before it happens. So this is what my experience in the past has been. So I'm just letting you know that I'm aware of that. I hope you choose to stick with therapy, because I think it will help you if you do the work. You cannot treat them with kid gloves. You can't, because they're never going to get better, but you also can't be mean or nasty or whatever. You just be truthful. And you don't abandon the client ever, no matter how difficult. Trust me, I have had clients where I went, sweet baby Jesus, so you don't abandon them. But you give them different interventions and you get curious and you let them know what they have, and you don't let them take that on as who they are. And once you've done every intervention you can think of, right? And they're still, and you're getting curious. So what is the fear? What are you afraid of confronting? What is the terror? What is the fear of abandonment? What's going on? Who abandoned you? What happened? You get them to talk, right? And if they will not engage, or if they will not work on themselves, if they won't work on, thoughts, because that's really what drives the behavior, the maladaptive thoughts, because their thinking is bordering on psychotic. That's why it's called borderline personality disorder. It borders on every single major personality disorder. And it borders on psychotic thinking because their thinking is very disordered. So if they're unwilling to work the self-esteem workbook, for example, if they're unwilling to, do a daily thought journal, if they're unwilling to do any of the interventions that you've suggested and you've done like 10 or more, and you've given them the books and they're not reading and they're not doing, and they just want to keep telling the same story, you have to stop them. And you have to tell them, it's like, if we need to sit here for an hour in silence, I will. Because we're not going down that path. So how about you get real? They're not going to like it. They'll rage. They'll do whatever. They'll threaten to turn you into the board. This is where your notes come in. This is why you have to have super good notes that show this is what I've done. These are the interventions. This is what the client's doing or not doing, So in my notes, I do the DAP notes. So, the date, the session, video, phone, whatever, where the client was, etc. And then a little snapshot of what we talked about. So client reported blah, blah, right? Client re-went over the same issue that we talked about since the beginning of therapy. This therapist stopped them, asked questions. This was their response. This is the homework I'm giving. This is the intervention. We'll check in with client next week or whatever. And then the next week, did you do the homework? Are you working on yourself? No, I'm not doing it. Okay, stop. Why are you here? I can't do the work for you. All I can do, I have no answers. I have only suggestions. So taking the suggestions is kind of up to you. So that's where your power lies. So why are you denying your own power? They either will get into that and really start getting real, or they'll come unglued or whatever. Once you have exhausted every possible way of trying to reach them, because like if direct doesn't work, then you go indirect. If going to the front doesn't work, you go to the back. If you go into the side, you go up, down, under, whatever. Once you've tried every possible intervention and they're still not making progress and they're still trying to stay stuck in the same story, and usually if you tell them no and you're just sitting there in silence, they usually stop telling the story, or they leave of their own accord because they're not getting whatever payoff it is. So you call out the payoff. What's your payoff? What's your payoff by staying stuck? What is your payoff by not moving forward? What is your payoff by staying unhealthy? What do you get out of that? How's that helpful? How's that working for you? You got to be blunt, honest, and caring at the same time. I don't want any of my clients to fail. I don't. And when they do, it makes me sad. It does. And I also realize and recognize that it's on them to grow or not. If they choose not to, okay, well then I'm not the right therapist for you. Let me give you 3 referrals to these higher levels of care. This is what I think you need because I'm not making any progress with you. And frankly, you're wasting your money and my time because you're not moving forward. And I don't want you to not move forward. I want you to get better. But you got to do the work and you're not. So obviously I am not the right counselor for you. Now, they're going to have whatever abandonment issues they're going to have. They're going to come unglued. But as long as you give them 3 referrals to a higher level of care, so meaning if you're an LPC, you refer them to psychiatrists. Absolutely. You refer them to a DBT using psychiatrist, or somebody who works with personality disorders, and you let them know it's like, I want you to succeed and you're not succeeding with what I'm doing. So obviously I am the wrong therapist and you would be wise to start looking at why you're not moving forward. What is the payoff? So here are these referrals. Good luck. God bless. And if they call again, you say no. I've given you 3 referrals. I am closing this out. You let them know ahead of time, and that's what I do. And I tell clients that when they are stuck, right? And they're like not making progress and, telling the same story over and over again and not doing the work and everything. I'm just kind of like, okay, here's the deal. I've given you this intervention, this intervention, this intervention, this intervention, this intervention, this intervention. You're not getting better. So either I'm the wrong therapist and you need somebody else, in which case I'm happy to give you a referral to 3 other, higher level care, or there is something that is stopping you from healing. And it's usually fear. So you might want to take a look at that. And if there is no progress being made, I'm letting you know right now that I will discharge the file. I will end therapy with you, and I will refer you out to a higher level of care. So I'm going to give it a few more sessions. Let's see what goes on. But at the end of the couple of sessions, I'm probably going to refer you out if you're not doing the work. Point blank. There's nothing wrong with that. You've given them fair warning. You're going to give them 3 referrals. You've got documentation to back up that you've given them every intervention known to man. Do you see where I'm going with that? And you cannot be afraid of their vengeance. Will they turn you into the board? They might. They very well might. And they don't have a leg to stand on as long as you've got the documentation to show no progress, no movement, not getting better. I've done every intervention I can think of. They need a higher level of care. Boom. Here's the referral for the high. We discussed why I'm referring them out or why I might refer them out. Gave them the higher level of care. Do you see where I'm going with that? So you can't be afraid of that. The board is there to protect the public. It gets misused by personality disorders. It does. It absolutely does. Crazy people that are vengeful, right, will try to use judges or boards or whatever to punish whoever they think has done them wrong, right? But as long as you've got documentation, you're okay. And as long as you show that you have done everything you can and you've consulted with other therapists, not just listening to this video, but consulted with other therapists and gotten their take on how to deal with a resistant client, then you're fine. So, and you do what you need to, but you don't abandon them. You basically make it up to them. So what I find happens is when I stop allowing them to tell the story, and I don't allow them to tell the story very often. It's like if they tell it more than 3 times, life is like a baseball game. It's like, nope, you're out. We're not doing that again. What is this getting you? Right? So, if you've already given them fair warning, we're not doing this, this is what needs to happen because this is a relationship between the 2 of us. So I'm giving you suggestions, but your part of the deal is to go home and work on these suggestions. And if you're not, that tells me that either your self-esteem is terrible and you don't love yourself enough to work on yourself, or you're terrified. And maybe that's what we need to be working on. So you got to do something, sweetheart. You can't just sit here and complain every week. And that's what I tell them. And I document that. So, yeah, they could go to the board, 110%, absolutely. And if your documentation is good, they got nothing. So anyway, there it is. And you just don't abandon them, and, unless and until you have to refer them out. Like if it's clear they're not getting better, they're not moving forward, they may be regressing in some cases. If that's the case, then you do no harm. And if that's the point where you're like, I'm not the right therapist for you, I need to refer you to a higher level of care, then you refer them to a higher level of care, meaning a psychiatrist or psychologist, depending on your state. So anyway, there that is. Good Lord, I went way long on that. I really hope that answered your question. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. When I first started, yeah, they used to scare me because they would scream and yell and curse and everything else. And then when I realized, it was like, oh, they're terrified. Oh, okay. Okay, I hear you. I hear you're angry. What's underneath the anger? There's nothing underneath the anger. Anger is driven by fear. So what are you afraid of? There's no fear. And then they start crying, so you just get curious, and you work with them as much as you can until it's clear you can't. Then you give them the referral to a higher level of care, but you warn them ahead of time. If I don't see any progress, it's a disservice to you to keep you as a client, because you're not making progress. I want you to make progress. So I'm going to refer you to these higher level of care so that you get better. And then you document. So anyway, that is it. The next 2 videos will be pre-recorded. I'm going to talk about financial abuse. And then the next one after that is going to be how to leave safely. So we're going to talk about all of that on a pre-records because I'm off hanging with the fam. All right, you guys, have a great week, and I will talk to you later. Bye.